So now, here we go with the property issues, and this is where fraud and the ridiculous mismanagement comes in. So I'm going to start off with something that wasn't a legal issue per se, but about 4 years ago we lived over at Aquia Terrace, which is down at the bottom on Route 1, not far from Garrisonville, very close to the Stafford post office, walking distance. And let me just tell you what, if you think living upwind from a sewage treatment plant is a way to go in this country, you're probably living in the wrong country, because you will stink. You take a bath and you stink all the time. I don't know why the EPA hasn't gotten in on this and taken care of this problem down here. You go to the food line down there and you smell the stink, and it's especially bad, say, in the summertime when the remnants of a hurricane come through and it's windy from the south, southerly breeze coming on up. It blows right south to north through that area. It's really unbelievable. I mean, it's so bad that there's a pet shop at the bottom of the hill and it overwhelms the pet shop animal smell in there. So, you know, we're talking pretty ridiculous right there at the post office for Stafford County. It's the main post office in that area at that bottom. And, you know, this is a grand example of the mismanagement of health by this county. It's just inexcusable. So we live there and we know firsthand what that's like. And the mismanagement of repairs. I mean, some of the dumbest people who don't know what kind of property do you have when you have something broken and the person who comes in to do the repairs has a broken arm because he was out skateboarding or doing something stupid and broke his arm, and now he's come to work with a cast on his arm and he's going to do repairs. What kind of ridiculous nonsense is this? So, you know, and it's very funny. I filed a lawsuit about that, and the same lawyer that represented them was involved in that George Washington Village, the same organization. Really out there digging around. And the Fredericksburg newspaper just cheerleading, hey, yay, yay, all the way down the line. Anyway, so we moved out of there, moved to Charlottesville, which was a big mistake, and then moved back up to what at the time was called Aventine Courthouse Apartments. While we lived there, the apartments changed names to Venator, and now they've changed names again to Ultras. So I'm going to skip the gritty details of what went on there, because I have a whole separate video of that already on Fired Without Cause on my channel at YouTube. So I'm going to skip that part for now. And I'll, you know, we can put a link or something in here and get that worked out. But the gist of that problem is that the government side of it, the courts. So I sued Deputy Merville and the apartment complex because Merville involved himself in that case there where I complained about the sewage gas that was coming out of the sinkerator in that place, and the fact that Rain and Son out of Hyattsville, Maryland comes down and knocks a hole in the wall. And that's also another separate video where they covered it up, but just by taping over it. I'll make a link out of that too. But the sewage gas in there was so intense it makes you feel like you're going to throw up. And so they refused to fix it. They went from March 2014 all the way down to June, and no repair. And then they say, come and sign a new lease. And I said, all right, I'll sign a new lease then, if you're not going to repair it, and then I'll sue you. And so the next day I put the money in escrow. The next day they reneged on a contract. And when I went down there to get it straightened out, they engaged Deputy Merville. I had another month on the contract. And they gave me a no trespass order for that office. So I've talked to a first sergeant from the Stafford Police, and he said, why would they do that when there's just a civil discussion? It's like, exactly. And that's just been within the last month. I spoke to his first sergeant, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, Miller or something like that, on the phone at Stafford Police. Why is that? Why would you involve a police officer? It's because the apartment people around here are thugs, and they want to use the local police to lie and to harass and attack people without cause. So And the judge is just as crooked. We'll come around to that in just a second, when the trial came around. But the police regularly interfere and involve themselves in civil matters that they don't do any investigation, they don't ask any questions. As soon as the department people call the police, then it's the fault of the renters, every single time. This is the corruption of this county right here. They are so stupid and so corrupt. They don't do any investigation. It's just unbelievable. They will from now on once this gets done, because this is going to be, things are going to change for sure, and there are going to be damages for this, monetary damages for this mess. That's why your taxes might go up. So anyway, we go to trial, and Foley just waves his hand and lets Merville slide. It's like, this is incredible. And the sheriff himself, later on, when I filed an IED complaint, the sheriff refuses to give me the report. It is not banned in the state of Virginia under the statute. I've read the thing 5 or 6 times. It's not banned for me to receive that, but he won't give it to me. Cover up. So, in the court, there was this one Charles Foley, and I saw him, and I was like, I just could not place where I had seen this guy before. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Where I've seen him before is because when I lived in Warrenton, I tried to start a little company on the side to do computer repairs called Pleasant PC. Already in town was a fixed structure. I wasn't planning on having an office. I was going to just do mobile. So there was an office already called, and it's run by this guy named Klaus Fuchsel. Well, Klaus Fuchsel is a liar, and he has his site called Doc Klaus. So there's no connection between Doc Klaus and Pleasant PC. He had nothing to do with it. So in anticipation of getting that domain straightened out with the owner, I put signs out on the side of the road. When Klaus saw that, and there was a domain taster involved, and then dropped my domain, and I didn't know about domain tasters at the time with that 5-day rule. Somebody out from Iowa or somewhere, Klaus registered my domain. So I sued Klaus for stealing my domain and cyber squatting. Charles Foley in the District Court of Fauquier County openly stated at the end of the trial, well, I don't know much about this. It turns out that somewhere around, let's say, I guess around 08, 09, when I was trying to do this, and I'd printed up business cards and had all kinds of stuff ready. It turns out that there was a famous federal case in California, or actually maybe Nevada or something like that, but it went to California to the 9th. Some crazy man who owned sex.com had been relieved of his domain illegally, and meaning that Network Solutions had the registry of the domain. The owner of sex.com was over here. Some guy wrote a letter to the registrar and said, pretending to be the owner, and said, I agree to sell the domain to this guy here. So he stole it through a fraudulent letter. Well, that old boy got sued right bad. And 2 interesting things happened. The smaller issue was that he lost, and when he had to give up his property, he made a run for Mexico, and his home that he owned, he stripped everything out of the home, including the kitchen cabinets off the wall, and then said, there's your home, there's your winnings, to the sex.com owner. Tens of millions of dollars in damages that were awarded. But what was fascinating was that the Ninth Circuit designated a domain as property, even though it wasn't physical property. It was the property of that owner. That case was settled long before I got to court with Foley, and I pointed this out. Foley stands around, well, I don't know. And so then he comes back with a judgment giving my domain to the thief, Klaus Fuchsel. Klaus Fuchsel cyber squatted on my domain for 2 years. So now, suddenly, I see this Klaus Fuchsel, this Charles Foley, judge again in front of me with this Venator lawsuit. And like I said, I didn't figure that out till after the fact. So I had filed a lawsuit for damages because of the smell and for breach of contract, for reneging on the contract, on the renewal, because we signed it, gave it back, and then they reneged on it in retaliation. And right before the trial, Bob Harris has the audacity to get an unlawful detainer without cause. He waits till just before the trial, not in July, not in August, not September, not October, but just right up before the trial in November. So then Foley stands there and compliments Bob Harris on his courtroom demeanor, and then after everything is said and done, he says, "Okay, I've heard enough for today. The case is over. I'll make my decision." And Bob Harris walks right up to the front and starts talking to the judge and handing him documents. That's called ex parte communication. So then the decision comes back, and Foley says the contract is invalid. Assigned. I have a cell phone record where I was called to come down and invited to sign the contract. I signed it. My wife signed it. We turned it in. It's over. It's over. And so then he said the contract's invalid. And then he says, but you owe the money for the rent from July all the way out to December, to the trial date, or November to the trial date. And it's like, based on what? Because if you go to a court of law, you have to have a valid contract. If the contract's invalid, no money is owed. So, if you go to court to collect money from another person, you have two options. You can use contracts, or you can use some sort of statutory penalty that's written into the law for some sort of damages, some sort of way, some penalty, some damages. But there is no other way to collect money from another person in the United States of America without these two methods. That's it. You're not getting money from another person unless you're just going out and shooting and carrying on. That doesn't count. So in this case, the contract, in his own writing, in his own words, Judge Foley is sitting there saying that it's invalid. So you have no collection. You can't collect $8,000 from me. And following that, in 2015, when the collection agency came after me, of course, they put me in for $8,000. I said, here, look, you go for it, and I'll sue you too for fraud. They wrote a letter back, and they said, we're not collecting anything, and we're taking the mark off your credit record. It's like, well, now let's see. So I have this court mark against me. So Foley comes up with this idea that he can make up something out of thin air. So he's created a conundrum for himself. He won't admit he's wrong because I filed multiple times to get this case reheard, and he won't because he's in a box. Either he has to admit that the contract was valid, and so therefore they can collect the $8,000. They have a legal claim. Fine. You want it, but then it means the eviction was illegal. But if there is no contract, then the $8,000 claim is invalid, and I don't owe you anything. But you can't have it both ways. He won't admit to what he pulled on me, just like he won't admit to what he did over in what do you call it, in Fauquier County either. That's the corruption in this county. And the sad fact is that he's not a sitting judge in Stafford County. He's a fill-in judge on this case. And why do they bring him as a fill-in? Why is he not in Fauquier on the regular bench in the first place? That's a major question. And you can look him up. When Clint Eastwood came to Warrenton over there to do the J. Edgar Hoover movie about the FBI and everything, you can see that Foley's involved glad-handing, trying to meet Clint Eastwood. Well, I had a cold all this week. I can't help it. I'm riled up now. So then, they damaged my credit record, and I cannot rent a house, or I can't rent an apartment. So since December of 2015, my wife and I have been living in a hotel. We're paying something like $1,700 a month for a 10 by 20. I work at a major, well-known organization where I have access to a loans database, a financial institution, where loans up into the hundreds of millions are being distributed out. I have access to that database. And yet my wife is washing my pants, my khakis and my shirts in a bucket and hanging them on a shower rod. And I'm taking showers with my clothes hanging in the shower with me that are just drip drying in there. So Foley has no legal basis. His incompetence is malicious. He's a crook. And recently, when I complained about his ex parte communications in a judicial misconduct complaint, they gave him a free pass. You just didn't like the judgment. No, I don't like judgments that have no basis in fact or in law. That's what I don't like. You're penalizing me for somebody else's sewage gas in that apartment and their retaliation and reneging on a contract and then evicting me without cause. That's what I don't like, and rejecting my check that I paid in July 2014 to go ahead and continue the lease that we signed in good faith. A bunch of crooks. And everybody says, you should have a lawyer. What a load of crap. That just goes to prove how corrupt all of you are. Judicial Misconduct Board at the Virginia State Supreme Court, the, what do you call it? And the complaint I made against Bob Harris, who Bob Harris later said, you make one more complaint against me at the Virginia bar and I'll sue you. Oh, make my day, Bob. Make my day, because I got new ones coming. So, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. It gets worse on the other videos. It gets much worse than what you're seeing right now. Much worse with the corruption with these people. So anyway, I get a letter because I had asked some questions in a FOIA or something like that to the district court, and I said, why is it, I think I asked the question, why is it Charles Foley is over here in this county? What is he doing over here? Well, because he came over because Deputy Merville was one of the defendants and they didn't want a conflict of interest with the judges and the police. Okay. Well, that was in something around mid-November, I think it was, of 2014. Then my tax case that I mentioned in another video came up December 29th of 2014, and there was Charles Foley again. So what about that? Who's in there now that you're trying to protect? Why is he on the bench? And why is it when I said, I want you to recuse yourself, he wouldn't recuse himself, and then now he smarted off and said, oh, when you write a letter to me and complain about these things, these are ex parte communications in retaliation. And then he says, now I will recuse myself if you come to court again. All the more inch-wise, just piecemeal admitting the flaws and the lies and the crookedness. Just admitting it. It's all going to come out. So what really needs to be done is that the federal government needs to come into the state of Virginia and say, what exactly are you idiots doing around here? Why is it that people can't go to court and get a fair trial? Instead, they're dealing with a stacked deck of a bunch of corrupt people working in the background simply because a person doesn't have a lawyer and they want to just ignore all the facts. It gets worse. There's a worse case of this. What happened after we moved out of there in the next video really borders on the profound. And it involves multiple states, unfortunately. And it involves two different judges. But I should also mention too, before I finish this video here, in the case of Venator, when Bob Harris decides to enter in this unlawful detainer right before the trial, what he was trying to do was usurp the judicial process. Because with the trial here, if he got an unlawful detainer and we got evicted for some reason, then how would we win this case and then move back in? That doesn't make any sense. All that expense and everything tied to that. So in October, late October, around Halloween of 2014, when Bob puts this stuff in, I called the court on the Thursday and I said, what's going on here? These are the same case. Yeah, no problem. I called the court on Friday. Are you sure about that? Yeah, all fine. Then Monday I get a phone call magically and they say the court case has been separated. Who decided? And so they start mouthing off. And I said, I'm not messing around. Who decided to separate the cases when you told me Thursday, Friday they were connected? I'm going to hang up the phone. I said, you better not hang up the phone and you better answer my question. I got one question. Who separated the cases when they were combined and they're supposed to be one subject? And the clerk says, well, on the phone, I guess I did. Okay, so now suddenly the clerk of the court, the district court of Stafford, is now setting the docket. So now they become judge and clerk. That's good. Come to find out later, after asking, that clerk has now been moved out of the general district and is now working juvenile. What does that tell you? Proves the point. Just corruption from one end to the other in that place. So, you can't get subpoenas served. You cannot get people to obey the law, the federal law on taxes and W-2s. You can't get the judges to this. You can't. Oh, and I should say, when I did, actually, I forgot to mention something. When I did have to go to court for the hearing about the unlawful detainer, I said to the judge, just a second here, who is the one who decided these to be separated? And he said, I did. And I said, well, on the phone, your clerk said she did. Now, who's telling the truth here? No answer. And nobody at the Judicial Misconduct Board, and nobody in Virginia gives a rat about any of this kind of stuff. Just pure corruption. Anything they can do, they can just judge and say, and no explanation. Just like Foley out in Fauquier County. Why is it that my domain was stolen? Why are you giving it to this guy? No explanation. Pure crooks. Just pure crooks everywhere. It's like John Frey, another circuit court clerk over there in Fairfax County, tried to bill me an extra $150 on a case up there and ended up having to stand before a judge himself. Had to get his own attorney. A number of years ago on an HOV case. There's a lot of corruption in Virginia. And let me just tell you, for those people of you who think that you're going to push me out of Virginia, I can tell you right now, I'm going to do the old Seinfeld Del Boca Vista on you, and I'm going to move one day, buy a piece of land, and build a house in Stafford County, because I'm in the proximity of the airports and the restaurants and the international foods and things. And I'm just far enough away from the craziness that it's got a little bit of a country feel to it. And I like Stafford people. I like the military set here. I'm crazy about the Marine Corps. I love it here. And I can't say this because I've never served in the military, but forgive me for misusing this term, but Semper Fi. I'm glad to be here. And so one day I'm going to get this crap straight, and this county is going to clean up its act, and it's going to get its head straight, because there are things that can be done that wouldn't cost a lot of money, that would make people's lives even better than they are around here. But yet these idiots in here and the Board of Supervisors don't know anything about running the county. And these crooks in here, these judges, they're going to be gone. They're going out here. And these clerks, they're going down the road before this is all over. And that little worm in the Attorney General's office over there, who's in the case in the Morgan Properties, he's going to be fired too. In fact, he'll be lucky if he doesn't lose his law license and end up in jail himself for suborning perjury in the Morgan Properties case. We'll come to that in a bit.